This is once in a lifetime opportunity for us to create those kind of pan-European solutions that do not infringe on certain things the member states do care about.
28th regime means that you create a concept or a framework that is entirely European. It's similar to the EU Inc. in the sense that it should create a separate corporate form that works EU-wide, and it doesn't matter whether you establish in Austria or in Estonia.
In Europe, we don't want American solutions. We want to be able to create companies, but we don't have to copy, Silicon Valley.
Do you think Europe will ever have its own Google?
Yes.
Politically, there's nothing actually speaking against EU Inc. Everybody agrees that it's a good idea and that it's necessary. It's really more about bringing the politics closer to the actual issues and thereby not creating so much extra bureaucracy and so much more fragmentation.
Do policymakers really understand what's happening in the startup world?
No.
But
at the moment, you also have to remember that actually founders don't need Europe. It's Europe that needs founders.
So, alright folks, welcome back to LuminaTalks, and in today's episode is one I've been really excited about because we are talking about something that's really buzzing nowadays in Europe, EU Inc. If you haven't heard of it, EU Inc. is changing the game for European start and scale-ups. It's a bold idea that could make scaling across Europe a whole lot easier. And here is why it's so important for me. Within Sunlink, we're all about helping ventures grow, but also innovate. And EU Inc. could seriously shake these things up. And that's why today we're diving into everything EU Inc., what it is, why it matters for you, and what's coming next. We've got two amazing guests lined up. We've been working on this from the inside. So let's get into it and see how EU Inc. could be the thing that finally helps European startups scale without any barriers. Let's go. Now, let me introduce our guests. First, we have Greta Koch, the digital policy advisor of Axel Voss. And Greta has been at the heart of shaping Europe's digital and AI policies over the last years. And she's been heavily involved in driving forward initiatives like EU Inc., but also the AI Act. She's the person who knows the ins and outs of European policy and is pushing hard to make Europe a more startup-friendly. Next, we have Iwona Anna Biernat, who has a wealth of experience working directly with startups. Iwona's journey took her from working within Entrepreneur First, helping people find their co-founders and launch their ventures, to now taking up roles like a COO or a fractional operations partner. And she's been within the startup ecosystem from all sides and knows exactly what's needed to get these companies to scale, especially when it comes to navigating Europeans' minefield. So together, Greta and Iwona bring a perfect mix of policy, but also practical startup experience. And they are here today to break down what EU Inc. means for you and why it's a game changer for Europe and how it could really reshape Europe's startups landscape. So Greta, we were diving straight in. So just can you tell me how you really ended up working for the European Parliament?
Yeah, sure. So I actually did an internship in the European Parliament right after I graduated from high school. I've always been interested in politics. I have an international background. I had just finished some semesters abroad in the US and in Russia, and thereby really saw why Europe as a strong geopolitical power is also very important. And then I did an internship here, and it was extremely thrilling to be at the heart of European policy. And after that, I decided to go into European politics also in my studies. I have a bachelor in European studies. I have a master's in international relations. And right afterwards, I always knew I wanted to be back in the European Parliament and work on policies that really matter and make a difference in Europe.
And you do, especially now with what you have done in the last year. So thanks. And Iwona, you have also very extensive experience working with startups. First, let's say Entrepreneur First. Now you're a CEO, fractional CEO. You're very into the startup ecosystem. That's clear. And what specifically drew you into Ewing?
Well, so yes, my background is legal, and I started at Entrepreneur Fest like 10 years ago. So I have 10 years working venture capital now, and I led the sort of legal operations and scaling processes globally for them. So I have seen it all from like a best company laws, most pragmatic, best standards in the whole of I would say the whole of the world, because we invested in Asia, in the US, but also in Europe, specifically in Berlin and Paris and London, where Entrepreneur Fest was headquartered. And so, yeah, now I'm a COO. I work with Project Europe that invests all across Europe. So we have done now, I think we've invested now in 9 countries in Europe, which is exciting. So I have actually had extensive experience kind of, on the company law side of things as well. And I, as an investor, because now I'm speaking from an investor perspective, like I can see a lot of challenges, pretty much every day, not only for us to invest, but also for startup founders to attract, international investors all across Europe. So it feels very fragmented. Anyway, my story with Ewing is actually quite funny, because I was in Rome on holidays 2 weeks, and I was like, oh my God, Rome is so great. I love this city. We've built such amazing, we've built all of this. We as Europe, this is our heritage, legacy. Everyone wants to come and see it, including Americans who are at the moment laughing about how, we are behind innovation. But in any case, someone I worked with previously called me and said, do you want to write this, proposal for Ewing? And I'm like, hell yes. I knew about Ewing. I think I was 3,653rd person who signed the petition and I signed it maybe 3 weeks before traveling to Rome. It resonated so much. When I saw the petition, I was like, wow, this is exactly what we need for Europe in order to be able to produce more companies, to innovate in Europe, to fix Europe for startups. And when they called me, because obviously I work with the person, Philip, who is co-initiator of this petition, he said, you have the best background and knowledge. You have done it all everywhere, pretty much across the globe. You should lead the development of this proposal. And so I've engaged 4 other law firms and experts to write a concrete legal proposal that we have submitted to the European Commission in January this year. Wow, time flies. But yes, that's the short story of how I got engaged with Ewing. But as I said, Ewing was something that resonated not only with me as a legal person, as an operator, but it resonated so much with everyone that we had thousands of people who have signed it over 2 months between October and December last year. And then we had, even more people signing over the remainder of the beginning of this year. And we still have people who continue to sign the petition. It resonates with everyone, because every investor and startup have actually experienced so many challenges when raising capital, when incorporating, when trying to move fast. For example, Entrepreneur Fest itself, when we opened in Berlin an office, it took us from an investment committee, because we ran this I don't know if you know much about Entrepreneur Fest, but we brought together hundreds of people into the same room, and we gave them an opportunity to speak to each other. They all were ambitious. They all had amazing backgrounds. We wanted them to find a co-founder and an idea. And once they, pair up and find an idea, they would pitch it to us, and we would say, okay, we'll give you 100K for you to start, and you have 3 months to prepare for demo day. So this model worked really well in some jurisdictions, such as the UK or even the US, but it doesn't really work in Germany, because it took us about 3 months, not us, but entrepreneurs, to incorporate a company, to finish incorporation. So by the time there was a demo day, founders were just very frustrated because they weren't able to secure funding from us. They weren't able to move quickly. So yeah, loads of challenges. I've seen it all, and I've seen it in at least at the moment, maybe 6-7 countries in Europe. So, and when you actually compare it against the UK, when it took 1 to 3 days from incorporation to money in the bank, that speaks for itself. So yeah, I've seen it all. So that's why I got engaged with Ewing and the whole ecosystem to actually call for this solution, because at the moment we're at this stage where innovation matters. Europe needs funders more than the other way around, because founders can leave to America and do exactly the same. And in fact, a lot of companies do, like I don't want to like name, but like Lovable, for example, has a Delaware company, and they operate from Sweden, right? It's for a reason. And we just need to focus now on like there's a whole loop that needs to be fixed, but fixing the very beginning of like the loop, which is like making sure you can incorporate the company. And so you can launch, scale, and fund companies quickly. So that will enable Europe to create more opportunities to innovate more.
But it's normal, eh? You're pretty deep into the thing and you're pretty excited about it, to be honest. Same here. And I think it's also the time that the time is there to have a kind of forum that would, solve all these issues. But then let's say my question to Greta, of course, Europe, you work more from a policy point of view, a regulation point of view. Do you think that at the idea, it feels more different? It's a regulation, maybe hopefully a regulation, not directive. But what do you think? In which direction do we go?
Yes, the thing is that this feels different because such a reform of European company law has been tried over the last 20 years. And for several different reasons, it has failed. And this is the first time in a long time that the Commission has given a signal, okay, we're going to tackle this issue from a holistic point of view. We have very clear recommendations in the letter and the Draghi reports on needing a framework for innovative companies across borders that has a holistic approach that also includes company law, but also other things like insolvency, like tax matters, like labor law. But of course, all of these different policy angles have very difficult problems within the parliament, within the council, that have so far stopped us from making real progress here. But at least this time we have some political signals, some political leadership, and some political willingness to make it work. Now, of course, what happens in the parliament and also in the commission is that you get hit with reality. So all of these problems that were not overcome in the past have to be overcome now. There will be issues with labor law because Germany has specific co-determination rules that don't work anywhere else. You will have issues with tax law because the council will have to decide on tax matters with unanimity, which basically means it's in this political climate impossible. With insolvency, we have tried very recently to have more harmonization, which is still stuck in the trilogue and is a difficult matter to negotiate. And then on the company law, you are hit with the legal basis question. So as you said, you hope it's a regulation, not a directive. But if you look into the legal basis of the EU treaties for company law, it's very clear, there's not much leeway, is that it has to be a directive unless you also want it to be unanimity in council, meaning it will take 10 years and nobody will want to take a decision. So you are now in the political realities of it. Yes, it feels different, but we will still have to tackle a lot of issues that so far have not been overcome.
And I think also we may not forget, they already tried and the world becomes more and more complex, more rules, more regulations, and you still have to find now, 6 years later, common ground. So let's say, I hope that I'm wrong, but let's say I hope I'm very optimistic in a way, but in a way I'm also realistic that this could be a same 2.0 thing as what we've seen years ago.
I think I feel compelled to add a few clarification on what e-wing is, because I think there's a lot of myths going around about what we want to, kind of harmonize, what we don't. The difference between what maybe the parliament is looking into, or like the EU institution, is harmonizing a lot of things. Okay, that includes labor and taxation. And we actually, our solution, the e-wing solution that we have proposed, that we have written a proposal for only focuses on one standard for Europe at the company level. So you are still subject to the local labor law and taxation. You have to have a genuine link to obviously when you incorporate in EU Inc., and you can be French EU Inc., you can be German, Polish EU Inc., you have to have an administrative sit. That needs to be through a genuine link with a member state. Obviously, I don't have a definition for that, but it has to be something legit. So we don't want to touch labor nor taxations for the same reasons that Greta just mentioned, including the fact that it's really difficult to agree on those between countries because of the different cultural differences in countries. And as we know from the past, when the first European company has been established, which was established through a combination of regulation and directives, it doesn't really work. Nobody is using it, first of all. And also there was a big compromise. And I think the biggest challenge was labor laws. So we want to avoid that. What we really believe Europe needs is one standard for the European company law, which is going to cover the full life cycle of company and business rules that you require, from like incorporation to insolvency or exit. So IPO or secondary, say M&A, whatever it is. And I think it's just one of those pan-European solutions that we think can work in Europe, because in the end, like you're still a French or German, Polish EU Inc. You don't infringe on anyone's sovereignties. So we really hope that, that Parliament can see that and engage with the ecosystem, because I honestly think that at this point of time, this is once in a lifetime opportunity for us to create those kind of pan-European solutions that do not infringe on certain things the member states do care about, but create something at the EU level, which, can enable people. So actually use regulation in a way that doesn't just regulate, but actually create solutions for Europe.
It creates opportunities. That's clear. And I really hope that the European Commission also sees it. But of course, as always, there is a difference between seeing an opportunity and then the political reality that we have also here in Belgium.
The Council has called for 28 regime, in their letter recently, and then also yesterday. And I'm funny to say, like there was an exclamation mark at the end of like, we want this 28 regime. Where is the proposal for it? So I'm hoping that really everyone is taking it seriously, because we can't end up with 27, 28 regime. And the funny part is like you have this true, 28 regime, and then there's the 28 regime, and we want the true 28 regime.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think politically everyone agrees that it should be a true 28th regime. But then again, you are hit with the reality of the legal basis, and we cannot change the EU treaties. I wish we could, but it's not possible. And so, I mean, of course, right now, the report that we're working on is an initiative report. So the Parliament basically has the initiative to send certain political signals to the Commission, and this is dealt with in the Legal Affairs Committee. So the Legal Affairs Committee has a competence for company law, and we are discussing which parts of company law we can fully harmonize in order to enable something like an EU Inc. But if you look at it making it a true 28th regime like EU Inc., I think also suggested to base it on a regulation. This would then mean, yeah, exactly. And that would mean unanimity in council. And every study suggests that means that it will take 10 years, which I think is a time we don't have. And we'll probably be hit with a political reality of not ever getting an agreement because of the political climate we're in right now. There will be certain suggestions that will be no-goes for certain member states, and we cannot change that. And with that reality, and also with the legal basis that we have as options, so you have 352, or you have enhanced cooperation, which is also not the most efficient way forward, or you have Articles 114 for the single market and Article 50 for company law, which means it has to be a directive. And so the question is, if it's a directive, how can we manage politically to really still fully harmonize, because you can have maximum harmonization also with directives. Which parts of the proposal do we really need to fully harmonize so that it's not 27 completely different interpretations of a single law in the member states, because then I think the entire exercise becomes obsolete. But how can we make sure that we have 27 times the same rules so that it equals to a 28th regime?
I don't think this will work, but yes, this is my, I think we need to be very bold. This is one, like I said, once in a time opportunity to create company law from scratch with one EU level registry, because if you end up with 27, I don't think you can match the company law of each country, and you will still have founders only incorporating in a handful of jurisdictions because of the unpredictability of like court interpretations, etc. But it's just, that's up.
So you would rather go for 352, knowing that will take 10 years and might not happen?
I would go for do it right or don't do it at all, because it doesn't fix the fragmentation. You will end up with, German investors investing in German companies. The whole idea of EUing is to enable, continental scale and cross-border investment opportunities.
Yeah. I think it's just the political question of saying, do we go for unanimity, which means it will probably not happen. So you say this is the right way, or don't do it. But I think that means don't do it, because it will then never happen. Or you try your best to go for a different. So that's really the political decision making behind it right now.
Okay. For the audience poll, if you had to launch your startup today, would you pick, for example, United States, Europe, or somewhere else? Hey everyone. I see a lot of comments from viewers who didn't realize they weren't subscribed. So I've got a small favor to ask. Please take a moment to double check if you're subscribed to the channel. It's a quick, free action that really helps keep everything we are doing here on track. But here is the thing. This isn't just me working on the show. I've got an incredible team of talented professionals behind the scenes. And your support makes all the difference in allowing us to keep delivering high quality content. Every time you subscribe, you're not just supporting me, you're supporting an entire team dedicating to make the show the best it can be. Thank you for being part of our journey. You're helping to shape the story we're telling together. And I'm truly grateful for that. So go ahead and double check your subscription. And thank you once again for being such an important part of our community. Okay, it's already, and this is an intro, already pretty intense intro, but okay, at the end, that's just something we wanted. Of course, not everyone is really into EUing, so maybe it's also good to, let's say, do the small introduction about, but what is it, why is it, and why it matters. So, Iwona, can you briefly explain what is EUing in simple terms?
Yeah, so EUing is a concrete legal proposal it's a solution for 28 regime currently being discussed at the sort of European level on how we can encourage more investment and in Europe. And essentially EUing started with a petition that was signed by 18,000 people by now. So we are calling for a pan-European entity with one EU level registry, a digital first obviously solution. So leapfrogging really digitalization across Europe, which will have one set of standard corporate law rules for all of Europe. So it doesn't matter where you incorporate your company, you're governed by this set of business law rules.
And Greta, you're writing on the 28th regime. What is the difference? What is it?
28th regime is the idea that we create a company form that is EU-wide, as Iwona has explained. So it's similar to the EU Inc. in the sense that it should create a separate corporate form that works EU-wide, and it doesn't matter whether you establish in Austria or in Estonia. It should have the same rules, but it will, like as it was suggested by the Draghi report and also communicated by the Commission, it's not only about company law, but it should also be a separate tax system, a separate insolvency system, and a separate labor law system. At least that's the suggestion that was made by the Commission. So it touches many different aspects. And what we are doing right now in the initiative report is really focus on the company law. So how could we basically make the EU Inc., which we don't call the EU Inc., we actually call it the ESSU. But how could we make such a European-wide company form work with the political tools that we have?
Just to add to this is that it is meant to be an optional an optional company rather than replacing any national regimes. And I think we both, Greta and I, pretty much agree. And this is the same as 28 or 28 regime. Ewing is a proposed solution for 28 regime.
And what are then, in your opinion, the three key problems this would solve for ventures nowadays?
I think there are many parts, but I think if I was to focus on three, I would probably say like we need standardization for Europe and we need a trusted entity. At the moment, if you are a French investor, you will stick to investing in France because you don't know the legal firms in other jurisdictions, or you will ask the founders you like to reincorporate either in the UK or in the US. So I think it will solve for that standard that is a trusted standard. So it doesn't matter where you are based, and it gives any founder opportunity to incorporate with that structure, and that you can do it very quickly. So the speed of that, the standard of it, the trusted form. So it solves for standardization and the speed of how quickly you can set up company and attract investors. It solves for the pan-European also kind of approach, whereby we at the moment, like French companies or Polish companies are competing against US or China tech giants on like a French, German or Polish level because of the fragmented ecosystem. Only 18% of companies in Europe right now consider themselves pan-European, despite the fact that, like you have French and German, like you can't compete. I don't think you can compete with US or China if you don't have that scale. And I think Ewing would obviously enable the scale and the pan-European. So you become a European company from day one. And I think it will solve for unlocking capital flow across Europe, which is a problem at the moment. Not only capital, but also exchange of ideas, tapping into talent, through ESOP, because you would be able to grant, options to employees across all of Europe from that one entity. So you don't have to set up 27 different, ESOP schemes. At the moment, it's really expensive, by the way. And I have seen it, throughout my work. I just received a message yesterday from a Swedish founder saying that he will move, all of his operations to the UK, because it's easier to attract talent. There are schemes, and it's so difficult in Nordic countries at the moment because you get taxed on day one. So a lot of that administrative burden comes, as a kind of third point. But just coming back to the second one on unlocking capital and talent flow across Europe, but also I guess exchange of experts, because at the moment a lot of Polish startups are like kind of operating as an example, within the Polish kind of ecosystem. If you unlock this pan-European mindset, you can tap into so many different expertise across all of Europe. So that's how I see how this opportunity can pan out if we do this right. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I heard last week when I also spoke with a legal specialist, he had a friend, and he also had a solution in ESOPs, and he sold that to Dale. So Dale incorporated the digital plan of creating ESOPs within, their own platform. So, of course, it means that they're not your own employees. They're the Dale employees, what you then subcontract in a way. But in a way, via their platform, you can create, a unified ESOP plan for all your employees working for you, but via Dale. Not an ideal situation, but it is a starting point that there are already solutions that could cover it. Of course, it comes with a cost, because if you would like to, onboard them after a certain stage when, when the rule regulation comes live, Dale has to fire them, you have to pay the price, and then you have to onboard them again. So also a very complex way.
We have to come up with creative solutions like this when we can really fix that, because in countries like the US, UK, you're able to, you still have 51 like states in the in the US, and you have to pay, you're subject to labor and taxation, state level taxations, etc. But like I think creative solutions are great, and I think we still will need companies like a deal to help with labor laws and taxations if you go for the e-wing solution, and that's okay. But yeah, it would be nice if we could just do it in Europe without having to pay for it. And then also you don't know what the nitty gritty of that agreements are, like I would love to read more the terms and conditions of that, and who pays the tax.
It's all for the startup, and the risk is for the startup, because they'll push the risks away. That's logic. So yeah, it's I think it's a good solution, but not the solution I would opt for. I would like to control the things myself and have it in-house instead of relying on parties like them. But okay, it's not there yet, so
well, it's one of the biggest focuses on our project. One of the core pillars on making sure that companies can tap into talent everywhere, because we have so much talent across Europe, but they are based in different parts of Europe as well. So it would be great if companies from Germany, Poland can hire someone in Spain. Doesn't have to like think about the legalities of setting up a scheme that costs like few thousands, and then maintaining it and all the valuations and everything. It gets really expensive. This is the nitty gritty of the daily stuff that founders need to deal with. So I think it would be great to see how this can be harmonized across all of Europe on what the Parliament's solution and the Commission's solution will be for that. And one more point, like this is one of the biggest hurdles. Like I spoke to Synthesia's founder, who is from Denmark, and I was on a panel with him, and I think someone asked him a question about whether he would start a company, and then he said never, and then they asked why. Obviously there are multiple different reasons, but one of the biggest reasons was that he would never be able to tap into the same talent that he is able to tap from London, because one, like people get taxed in Denmark and Nordic countries on day one of a grant, which becomes expensive. So you as an employee, you make an investment into a company that also is unable to pay you more because they are so early and they want you to specifically come and join the company to work with them. But they can't because it's just too expensive. Like you get taxed on day one. So yeah, I think it's one of the most important core parts that need to be solved as part of this.
I have a fun thing to add on top of that. Synthesia yesterday rejected the 3 billion takeover from Adobe and Meta. Yeah, at the end. So I think it's a starting point. It's a combination of, okay, if you can also create an organization that's on a European level, I think we can do the same as what they are doing in US or in Asia. We can also buy companies, but we need a little bit more, let's say,
we need to create them more. So we need to create a better infrastructure and ecosystems in Europe. And it's great that Synthesia is doing so well in 11 labs. They're amazing companies, and the founders are amazing and super smart. And I think we need to do that. We need to create real companies that can compete on global level. And that's a really great start. And hopefully we will enable more company creation across Europe. Yes, it's exciting times though.
It is. And also maybe because I'm convinced a lot of people will ask, okay, now we have set the first steps in Ewing, no matter how you want to call it, but let's say is the first steps in a pan-European entity, Greta, but what do you think could be the potential roadmap? Okay, I know directive, regulation that will vary, and also the roadmap length, but let's say what's on the table right now, what are the steps to take, on which level? Because I'm convinced a lot of people will have the same question.
it's a bit up to the Commission what this package of a 28th regime should look like. So as I said, originally what was communicated is that it should cover more than just company law and just setting up one corporate form, which is already difficult enough, but it should tap into several different legal aspects of the European legal framework, so including insolvency, taxation and labor law. But there are different ways how the Commission can go about this. They can either say, okay, we have a 28th regime package, so like a 28th Act, let's say, and that includes many different or separate proposals concerning the 28th regime. One of those proposals being a new corporate form, which would then go under under company law, and that would essentially be an EU Inc. A different way would be to look at it from the omnibus perspective, which the Commission has taken quite a lot lately, which means you try to change or amend existing laws, because there are, of course, already, we have just passed the digitalization of company law last mandate. There are many different directives, especially in the company law form, that already tried to tackle certain aspects of the 28th regime. So that's something that the Commission could try to do in the form of an omnibus to amend existing laws. Or it really goes for the holistic package of this is the 28th regime, this is what it includes, and sends it to the Parliament, which then has to split it up among themselves. So that's quite a curious question that I would like to hear the answer from the Commission as well, because in the work program now they said it will be a directive on the corporate form, meaning the EU Inc. 2 days later, they said, no, we're not going to go for a directive. We're going to go for a regulation. So I think the decision is not made yet. But in any case, the Commission wants to present its ideas and its legislative proposal in the first quarter of next year. So I guess March, maybe. Sometimes first quarter can also mean a little bit later, like April. So around that time, we will get a Commission proposal. And then what happens is that there's the referral to the Council and the Parliament. In Parliament, that always takes a bit longer than in the Council to decide which committee should deal with it, who's the rapporteur, when the negotiations start. The negotiation process in the Parliament can sometimes also take a bit longer. And then when the Parliament has a position, you go into trilogue. So usually such a legislative process can take a couple of, maybe a year or two.
Not so long. Depends also the type of complexity. But of course, we need it now. Let's be honest. If I go in Ghent and I talk to the startups here or in Belgium in general, I think every startup or even people thinking I have an idea, I want to start a company, they want it now. Every hour, every day we waste is time wasted and opportunities wasted. But at the end, it's complex. That's something that we need not forget. So I really hope that soon between brackets we have in a way something where we can work with, and that will be in the advantage to grow faster, scale faster, be more innovative, and have bigger reach. So I think let's pray all for that.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you also some maybe commercial context on this, is that we are lagging behind, and we've probably wasted about 10 years in Europe, just like, being a playground, not a player, as Andreas, one of the co-initiators like to say. And I think, at the moment, speed is key. Like, we can't take 50 years as, with the European companies to do this. I think it's on the top of the agenda at the European level, and I'm sure Greta can confirm that. The Council has been calling for it, and they want a solution. So I think I'm very optimistic that we will get to a place where we will build something amazing for Europe and fix that. Whether I'm overall optimistic, I don't know, but there's a huge hope for this to really pan out across Europe.
So that was an amazing context. So now we know very well what EU-Inc is and why it matters and where we are heading. Now it's time to dive into the challenges behind all of this. Why scaling in Europe is very hard, and it feels like playing in 27 different markets.
So that was a fun one. I always love moments to step out of the serious talks. So what we talked about EU Inc. connecting what's fragmented is so Europe can finally build as one. That's exactly what we try to achieve within Samlink. Most companies are sitting on a mountain of data, but they can't really find their way through it. And it's like looking for your own child in a haystack. So we help them make the unknown known. We really go beyond building data platforms. We work on data engineering, AI, and agentic systems that actually solves real problems. And through our Pulse Labs studio, we turn those ideas into ventures that operate on a European scale, not only here in Ghent. So if you see a project where our paths might cross, whether it's about AI infrastructure, data ecosystem, or agentic systems, let's talk. We love teaming up with people, and we want to build the next wave of European innovation.
So, Iwona, what do you think? Is Europe does not have a startup problem? Is it a scale-up problem? What do you agree, disagree?
I think it's both, but I think I disagree. I think it's a more momentum thing. I think if we can fix, have a pan-European entity and have a global mindset from day one, we can fix both the startup and scale up problem, or more of a momentum like Europe can create amazing companies. It doesn't have to be scaled, because not all companies need to scale, and especially nowadays in tech innovation. Like, yes, some companies need to hire across all of Europe, but most of the time, like, you could create an amazing company without having to scale. So I think it's more about momentum and believing that you can build from Europe and be pan-European entity from day one. And with that global mindset, that's what we need to kind of fix for startups in Europe, in my opinion.
Greta, I know you're not so involved in the pure AI regulations, but from your, let's say, view, do you think is it an overhyped barrier to growth, or something that's actually needed to safeguard innovation?
So first of all, for anyone interested in that, please listen to the podcast with my colleague Kai Zenner, because he's the real mastermind behind the AI Act. But of course, having worked for Axel Voss, who is a leading person for the AI sphere, I would say yes, of course you need regulation, because you want to have a human-centered form of AI. You don't want to make sure that governments deal with AI like they do in the US and China, and don't safeguard your privacy, don't safeguard your data, and can infringe on your entire life, basically. So in that sense, yes, we need a regulation in order to safeguard it, but of course there has to be a balance between bureaucracy and innovation.
And if we talk about innovation, what kills innovation faster in Europe, in all the regulations, or the fear of taking risks?
I think it's a combination of everything, but also there is that mindset in Europe, at European level, that you are second best, and we need to fix that for founders as well, again. But I think, yes, risk is difficult in Europe. There's less appetite for startups, for corporates to work with startups.
The idea that Europe regulates first and innovates later, is that a fair criticism, Greta?
Yes, it is. We're mostly dealing with the regulatory side. We're very rarely dealing with the innovative side. There's very little room for pushing innovation. So while I am a fan of certain types of regulation, because we need to have a human-centered framework for especially the digital sphere, we do also need to have leeway for innovation, and then that's why certain things like special economic zones would be helpful, sandboxing would be helpful. So to have really an innovative framework where while you're developing your idea, you are not immediately bound by all the regulatory problems that the EU is facing. So yes, in that sense, I agree with that statement.
A question for one of you both. Should Europe treat startups like essential infrastructure, because they are, let's say, the engine of a European motor, radical, or just common sense?
It's common sense at this point. Like, the next 10 years will define whether Europe is a global player or not. So if we can't innovate and we can't create infrastructure for people to build amazing companies, we will lag behind. And it's really Europe needing founders right now. So it should be common sense, but we should radically, change how we approach startups, for sure. And And I hope that people can see it. And I think people do see it. Like Draghi report was very clear on that.
Is the whole European tech sovereignty thing more politics than substance, or does it really matter?
I think it matters because of politics. We're finding Europe in a time where transatlantic relationships have changed radically, where the Asian market has changed radically. And so, yes, we have depended on certain international relations for a very long time that have now changed completely. And so, yes, I think that tech sovereignty is something that needs to be achieved also in order to be innovative. It's true that most of the top digital innovative companies are always in the US or now in China, but you will not find a single European company in the top 10. And that has something to do with sovereignty, of course, yes. So I do think that this is a key question that Europe has to deal with. And that's not it is political because of the circumstances, but that doesn't mean it doesn't matter.
If founders wrote the EU policy instead of lawyers, do you think things would move faster or just fall apart after a while?
Oh, wow, this is a very controversial question. I think things would fall apart. If we're creating anything, or whether it's a company structure or we need to make sure that it is a credible entity. So yeah, we definitely need lawyers, but we need standards. And once we have standards, everyone is, on board pretty much. So it's easier to kind of navigate. But no, I don't think founders should rule the world. I'm not sure if I understood the question, but that's
okay. That's okay. To be honest, I also agree that's not the founder. It's like in US. It's a side note. Yeah, it's not the Meta, Google, Amazon, and Nvidia that has to determine what the rest has to do. No, it's the government. But anyway, sometimes it's easier said. I will do it myself. I will write it, and everything will be better. And the reality is often not that. But yeah. It's sometimes easier said than done.
I've seen it all, although it would be nice to have harmonized documents and things that people, it's to make it easier, but you still need lawyers, you still need compliance people to, help you navigate. You don't want fraud and weird things happening. And, I've seen it when founders try to do things on their own without lawyers. And that's probably always the worst kind of decision that you can make for your company.
Live reaction prompt. Which hot take do you agree with the most? So, Iwona, of course, now you see a lot of people starting an own company in US. Why? Why do they go there compared to what they can do in Europe? What's going wrong?
I don't think there's anything wrong. I think you have standards. As I explained previously, like we need one European standard. US is very well established in terms of the company law structure. It's known to investors. It's known to founders. It's known to professionals. So it has credibility and trust across all of the ecosystem. So, and also it's easier to attract US investors and many founders who are ambitious. They want to start somewhere where any investor from anywhere in the world will easily incorporate a company and fundraise and can exit without any problems. At the moment in Europe, we have fragmented markets, and we have obviously different company laws. There's no true European standard. So companies tend to either choose US or even the UK. Just to start company and to raise money. That attracts more investors, obviously, because of the credibility, that one trusted entity approach. I think second is actually the tapping into a market that's bigger, larger. So if you look at China or the US, they have huge, large markets, even India. In Europe, the problem is that we do have a single market, but there are a lot of artificial barriers across this single market. So in theory, you end up with like really fragmented ecosystems in Europe. So you don't actually get to tap into 450 million of consumers in Europe in the same way you would do in America. And I think that's something that we need to look at the European level. There's also a third one, which is like, it's easy if you have a US company and you become a US founder, depending obviously on the industry you work in. But if you create for consumers, like it's a B2C, opportunity is bigger if you are a US company to tap into that market, and to also to win bigger contracts. At the moment, like even procurement or like bigger corporates, they don't really want to contract with startups in Europe. So a lot of companies choose to do that. So I'll add on one more point, because I think it's important here that in Europe, we should really focus on building companies that it doesn't matter where you are geographically, because you are building a company that can have a huge impact, but doesn't really need the 450 million consumers. So companies like, for example, ACML is a good example, right? Like you don't actually need to tap into a 450 million. But if you want to do that, a lot of companies have chosen to do it. And finally, I mean, it's the legal friction of running a company, you know, in Europe. A lot of admin is a problem for a lot of founders. So they tend to just move to the UK or US. I think about 30%, according to Dealroom, have moved across Atlantic and decided to start companies there, or have reincorporated. But that data doesn't really include how many companies have incorporated or reincorporated, flipped their operations to the UK, because UK is part of Europe, and when they release data, it's, you know, so we don't really know. We don't have a clear kind of image of that. Does that answer your question? Or
For sure, but is also not the valuation issue for certain founders the reason? Because if you compare, let's say, Belgium with the Netherlands compared to UK or Paris, for example, and then compared to US, and you do in all those countries the same, your valuation will be way different. Because the risk appetite is also, let's say, in US way more there than what we have here. I think investors in Europe are more defensive. Is that also one of the, I think maybe that could be one of the main reasons, because I say, I lose less shares, less dilution. So at the end, I have also more money to play with. I have also a very big play field. It gives me a competitive advantage instead of staying in Europe with their 27 rules, 27 countries, 27 markets, 27 languages, if you want it. It becomes pretty complex. At the end, when you start a business, it starts with, but how do you value my business? And what do I get if I share it with someone that takes also part of the risk, so that we can grow together? And I think today, a lot of people that I've met in the last years, and to be honest, I was also one of them, we were also thinking, but why should we stay here?
Of course. I mean, it makes sense. I agree. Valuation, you know, you can raise money quicker. There are a lot more investors, and they are all pretty much based in Silicon Valley. So it makes sense for a lot of founders, but that is exactly why we need to create a pan-European entity, because if you consider yourself a European level company, that will definitely enable more of like creating more momentums for early stage, will also create more competitiveness, you know, across investors who will want to invest more in Europe. So I think at the moment, we just, you know, founders are forced to operate in silos in Europe. So it does make sense to move to the US. But you will see there are companies who, like even 11 Labs or Synthesia, they're European, right? So they raise big money without without moving their companies across Atlantic, although I'm not sure about the 11 Labs. I think they might be a Delaware company, which I honestly, like, I don't judge them. And I think they have to do what's the best for their companies. So evaluations are important, and yes, but today you can build companies really for nothing, for very, like, you don't need as much capital as used to. And so yes, valuations matter, but I think slowly maybe they will less. And then once we have an EUing, a pan-European trusted entity standard, more investors will want to invest in Europe. There will be more startups, more momentums, and valuations will go up as well, I think. So yeah, of course, like, it will make sense. If you want to tap into the larger market of consumers, that makes sense. But if you are like, you need heavy cash to create, like, I don't know, a deep tech company, it doesn't really matter whether you're in the US or in Europe. Because you can build, you're not reliant on a large market, but you do need to attract more capital. And I think EUing could solve for that, because once we establish just one standard, it doesn't matter like whether you're investing from US or UK or within Europe, you will be investing into a European company from day one, which has like that European scale, like European mindset from day one. Not even European, I would say more global, because it's not about competing against the US. I think it's just standing shoulder to shoulder with US and offering something to founders that, that will want them to stay in Europe, because they can raise from anywhere at bigger valuations if they need to, or cash needed for, especially for like hard tech companies, right? You need a lot of like heavy capital, intense capital at the very beginning, and that is really hard to raise in Europe as well. But I think, I mean, I'm very positive about, how much we can fix in Europe. And, we need to bring more money into venture. We need to use saving and capitals. We probably need IPO exchange and everything else. But yeah, I think if we encourage more early stage investments in Europe, there will be more momentum. So better valuations over the next decade, if we do this right.
The first step is then, for example, EU Inc. is established, hopefully. But then is the next step, IPOs. From a startup point of view, you have seen a lot, scale-up point of view. How do you think we are, in which ecosystem in Europe we are? Is it sufficient? Is it not sufficient? What should we change? Because I've heard from Andreas Klinger in one of his recent podcasts, that's a very big issue in Europe. Is that something that you agree or disagree?
Yes, I do. I agree. I think we need to have a strong European exchange. And we don't have that at the moment, nor does London. At the moment, London is struggling to attract IPOs. So most IPOs actually emigrate to the US, which, to be honest, like, I would advise to do a company at the moment. So you need to either integrate the London exchange with the European, or create a pan-European exchange, so that we can bring the value back to Europe. In terms of like making Europe more attractive in a long term for startups, I think is a key thing to solve. At the moment, if a company was to IPO, let's say in Amsterdam, probably investors would sue them, because lack of credibility and and also the scale of it versus the American exchange. But I'm an operator, Pez, so like I do work with investors and founders. So like, if I was to advise them, I'll probably say go America, like go big and ambitious. But if we can solve that for Europe, that would be wow. And the way I see EU Inc. within the context is that it is a pan-European solution that doesn't infringe on anyone's taxations and labors, which, member states care about. It fixes the first part of the loop, which is incorporation. So launching a company, investing into a company. So you have this one standard, the speed of it creates more momentum, confidence across the ecosystem. Then because you have all of these momentums, then you bring more venture into more money into venture from private investors, which is one of the biggest challenges in Europe. Then again, it's like focusing on talent and immigration rules And then the last part is the IPO, which is you can kind of build on top of that. So once we fix one by one, each of these problems that Europe has, like IPO would be probably one of the biggest wins. And it would create almost like a signal, okay, like this, this is a big market, and we can create our own winners, as America does now, as, China does now. So it's about time if we want to compete on a global stage. That's my view on this.
And Greta, your take from a more European regulatory point of view?
Yeah, so I do think that IPOs always come up in the, let's say, maybe not the top 3 reasons to change something in the legislative reform, but maybe number 4. So when we talk about what and who the EU Inc. or the 28th regime is for, obviously we always talk about innovative companies. That doesn't mean that you have to qualify to be an innovative company in order to take part in this corporate form. But essentially not every startup in the entirety of Europe will have interest in using their corporations across border or to exit the market and so on. I mean, this is really about innovative companies in the sense that you try to, you're maybe in the tech sector, you're trying something new and you might want to have a patent. So in the sense of who and what this is for, this is very, very important. And when you talk with those innovative startups right now, I would say like the main reasons why we need an EU Inc. or the 28th regime, access to finance and access to talent, as Iwona has now said several times, obviously the 2 main reasons why we need this. Third, which is the most obvious one, but I think also a key one when we talk about the political difficulties, why it's so difficult to set up the EU Inc. as it was designed, is full free movement. So meaning that you can set up in a member state, but it doesn't matter where you operate. You don't have to set up again. You don't have to register again at different member state. So that's the main reason. And then when you talk about with the startups and you covered those main 3 reasons, so access to finance, access to talent, full free movement, it's always the IPOs that come next. And so since it is for innovative companies, this is very, very important in the context of it all. It's not something that we can tackle in the corporate, in the company law sphere, but it's definitely something that the European Commission also has to think about.
Yeah, I just add to that because Greta mentioned innovative companies. So there was, and maybe there is, because we don't really have clarity, is whether this optional regime should be available only to innovative companies or all sorts of companies. So what startups, and I'm speaking from like the ecosystem perspective, is that we don't have a definition of what innovation is or what innovative is. And I think I'm pretty much in like agreement with Greta. I think if I maybe I misunderstood, but in any case, like I think we can't have Brussels regulate what a startup is, innovative. And I think,
it should be open to everyone, but it doesn't mean it's interesting for everyone. I'm just saying it's mostly interesting for innovative startups that in their creation already think about cross-border. They already want to market their product in a European way, and that doesn't apply to every single startup everywhere. So the EU Inc. will not be interesting to every form of startup. It will mostly be interesting to innovative startups, but it should of course be open to everyone, not even necessarily startups. We're not putting a limit even in size. It should be open to everyone, but of course the focus is we want to have startups and scale-ups that are successful and innovative in Europe.
And definitely that could lead be a pathway or towards a more integrated kind of IPO approach in the future, So, yeah, it's definitely like a first step towards building something even bigger, because having an exchange European is a big, it sounds like an ambitious, but truly we already have a single market, so it should be possible.
But a question that I have myself now is, but is it really necessary to wait with, let's say, drafting an IPO related act in a way where we say, okay, at the end, no matter where your company is, in Belgium, in UK, or in Sweden, or in Poland, or in France, at the end, you have your company already there. You would like to do an IPO. You can only do it in one stock exchange today, more or less. Why wait and just start collaborating with all the stock exchanges in Europe and create an IPO on top of that? And do it synchronized with, let's say, the track of EU Inc. today?
It's possible that the Commission will propose that. I just haven't heard them have that conversation yet. Let's say in the report that we're focusing on, its company law that doesn't necessarily touch on IPOs. That's why we're just talking about creation of the company, registering of the company, access to finance, etc. We're not even covering the full life cycle. It's just we're starting the theoretical exercise. Let's say. The Commission, I don't know. I can't answer for them why they cannot synchronize that. I think they should, possibly political reasons why it's not possible right now.
I think it might be just called on having a European exchange. I was in Financial Times recently, and so I think there is appetite for that, and I think it's something that I have seen on one of the agendas. I don't know if it was the council or somewhere where they discussed pan-European exchange. I think this will just naturally happen, and it will happen.
Is it not necessary that startup founders, scale-up founders, or maybe companies like a Perplexity, or let's say the big players, the tech players, or let's say big companies to court in Europe, where they say, we are not on the stock right now, but we would like to. Okay, create it now because we need to have that push now, and we don't want to wait for a kind of pan-European structure. We want to do it here in our own region where we are created. Is it not up to, let's say, us, the companies, to give a signal to say, hey, just do it synchronized and let's try. At the end, if not, again, we not collect ourselves in a kind of petition like with 18,000 people, nothing will happen. So maybe it could be also an opportunity to raise a flag and say to every person listening to this episode to say, hey, let's start EU Inc. 2.0, but then for IPOs.
No, I love the idea, but I think you need to do things step by step. You can only EOing is focusing on the first step because we think that it's going to drive the appetite even more for an European exchange. Because you will create, as I said multiple times, like it will create more early stage not create, but there will be more early stage investments, therefore more companies and more momentums. And if we see that momentum in Europe, you can create that standard. But I think this is something that can be done in synchronized. And I hope that someone can start another petition to do that perhaps. But it's not what we are advocating for. And like I said, I don't think we can fix everything. Even when Merz and Macron said that they are pro pan-European entity, but they don't want it to be to cover everything. As an example, like they don't want employment, they don't want taxation to be part of that. And they said it in a very, in a statement in a Franco-German summit. It's exactly what, we propose, but it seems to be kind of like not coordinated very well. I'm still trying to figure out how the European institutions work. They perhaps a copy.
Sorry, I think that actually stakeholders are not that united on whether we should already incorporate the listing aspect of it or not, or the possibility to list or not. And because when I talk to startups, there's very, very differing views on it, because a lot of them in the process say even to consider to list on the stock exchange is something that is, again, only interesting to a certain part of innovative companies and also very late in the process. And if we're now saying it's already politically difficult to set up the 28th regime, and then we immediately connect stock market issues, which are already difficult enough also politically to it, as Iwona has said, we're trying to force something that it might not be interesting to everyone. And then the next aspect is that this is connected, like when you try to set up an EU Inc., it's mostly similar to a limited liability company, so not something that is listed on the stock exchange. We have taken a similar approach because this is most interesting to startups. But then to add to the fact that you can then list on the stock market, you would raise the threshold of bureaucratic things that companies need to do before setting up the company. So you're actually making the registration process or the transfer process more complicated. If you now leave out the stock exchange option, you make it more complicated in the later stage, because you would set up as an EU Inc. and then by the time you want to reach the stock market, you might have to transfer, but at least it doesn't concern like this threshold. The bureaucratic threshold is not higher for everyone that is included included in the EU Inc. So that's the main rationale. We're still discussing it also politically because there were some amendments on this, but so far there seems to be a certain threshold that is bureaucratically too high to already think about stock market now.
Comment one thing you would fix first if you were an EU commissioner for start and scale-ups. The first question is for one of you. Can the EU Inc. stop Europe's brain drain?
Yes.
Yes.
Should AI startups get lighter rules than others?
No.
Would you support a deep tech company outside the EU?
Yes.
Do policymakers really understand what's happening in the startup world?
No.
No.
Will EU Inc. make fundraising faster for startups?
Yes. 100%.
Would you personally launch a startup under EU Inc. as it is described?
Yes.
Greta, is bureaucracy Europe's biggest competitive threat?
No.
Do you think Europe will ever have its own Google?
Yes.
Is Europe moving fast enough when it comes to innovation?
No.
No.
Is trust Europe's strongest brand? So then can regulation and then innovation really coexist?
Yes.
Yes.
It depends what you mean by regulation, but if it's the type of regulation that would establish EU Inc., that's like an innovative approach to regulation.
Quick fact drop. Only 18% of early stage investment in Europe cross borders, but what's stopping the other 82%? So where are we right now? Is EU Inc. just a dream on paper, or are we really moving towards legislation or just a directive?
So we are moving towards legislation. As I said, there will be a proposal from the Commission. I just don't know what it will look like yet. And we in the Parliament are making suggestions what it can look like. Right now, it looks like the part of the 28th regime that reverts to the EU Inc. So the European-wide corporate form is most likely going to be a directive. This is very, very unfortunate politically. Also, the MEP that I work for really wants to have a regulation, but we're lacking the legal basis. So we would have to change the EU treaties, which is another thing that would be very nice if this was brought on its way, but unfortunately it's not. So we're probably looking at a directive that the Commission will propose next year. It's not just a dream, but I do think that there is political reality that has hindered any form of the EU Inc. in the last 20 years. And those stops basically, or those hurdles, are not gone suddenly because the Commission has proposed something like this. So it will be a very, very difficult way ahead.
Okay, great. And of course, you see, let's say, all the input from European Commission and European Parliament. Yeah, there is definitely a mixed, let's say, appetite. You have people for, you have people contra. Is it really clear who is more on the train pro and against? And then the main question is, what can we do as a startup ecosystem to convince them that the pro is really the right train?
Yeah. I do think that technically, like, it's not that you cannot really say these people are against and these are for it, because technically everybody supports the idea of a 28th regime. But then as soon as you start talking about it, there's people that are nitpicking which parts can actually be harmonized and which should be left to national member states. And this already starts in the Parliament, but that will be much more crucial when we actually get to the Council side, because every member state has its own rules. And the reason why we still have such a fragmented single market is because member states like their own rules, and to touch certain things in certain national competences is very, very sensitive. I'm from Germany. There we have the German notaries who really like the system and don't want to give that up. We have the German system of co-determination, which has caused a lot of problems politically in Europe already because none of the other member states really buy into that. And so I think that for those stakeholders that really want to push the EU Inc., I think the Council side will be much more difficult to deal with than the Parliament itself.
It's funny on the notary stuff because honestly, I think notaries can reinvent themselves. They don't need to be useless in respect of 28 regime. They could actually be really helpful. Like we have seen it in Europe. This already happened in Portugal where you have notaries that reinvent, but it's actually funny because like notaries aren't going to be the one who are going to be driving the Europe's innovations and our ability to stay competitive on a global scale, but like seeing how much influence they have over over decisions being made at the European level. It's quite old, in a sense, because they could really stay relevant within that space as well. But it's a fear. It's speaking from fear.
And let's say if we would miss the train, and let's say, what would be the financial impact for Europe? If we would remain as it is right now and without Ewing, what do you think, Iwona?
I think the next 10 years will be defining whether we are able to create, innovative companies that matter and are important. So we need to create companies that both the US, China, or whatever India want. And if we miss the train, we just become a playground. This will have an immense effect on European economy. I think AI is also stepping in to take some of the jobs, etc. And we need to be able to respond, create amazing companies and value in Europe so we can stay competitive, but also create opportunities for people in Europe to really stay ahead of the curve, not be so dependent on the US. So they don't just pull out the plug, anytime they're unhappy. I can see already how Trump is trying to affect our policy in Europe, for example, by saying that if you over-regulate, I will not be happy, therefore you need to now unregulate, and it's a really funny kind of, but this is just an example, we really need to be a player, not a playground.
As you are very close working with founders, you have also worked, let's say, on the investment part via EF. Yeah. What are the biggest fears from them about a unified EU company law?
I don't think there's any. In fact, all of them have signed, and they constantly message me because, how we work in venture capital, we are on WhatsApp with everyone. They're like, oh my God, amazing work. This is so exciting. There's no fear. I mean, if you're asking me whether it will happen or not, there is no, I would say that people are very reluctant to believe that institutions will respond to what they want and need, that they are able to listen to them to create something that they're actually calling for. Some are very optimistic about it, and everyone does realize the impact on the European innovation economy and staying in Europe. But at the moment, you also have to remember that actually founders don't need Europe. It's Europe that needs founders, and founders will do well no matter whether Ewing will exist or not. Especially the ones that are determined to do so, they'll just go elsewhere. Where ecosystem works for them, like the US, which would be a sad, outcome.
Sad evolution. Yeah, that's also one of my fears, to be honest, that if, let's say, regulations, they do not have to be in favor of the startups, but they have to be an enabler of, let's say, doing business, and it can be locally and also on a global level. And I think that is something that we have to work on, but also I think be more proactive instead of reactive. We are always, let's say, running behind the big players. I think we should, we are a very strong region. We are rich enough. We have smart people here. But why are we always listening to Trump? Why are we reacting what China does? Why are we not the driving force in this global world, or one of? At least that we are a challenger of them. But today we are just, let's say, following them and reacting on them.
But also, you have to remember that in Europe, we don't want American solutions. That is, we have our own cultural things. We want to be able to create companies, but we don't have to copy, Silicon Valley. And we shouldn't. In fact, Ewing is a very pan-European solution. We didn't just copy Delaware laws. That's not what we did. What we did, we looked into global jurisdictions across all of the world and see what makes a successful company law work. And we've drafted this proposal, including some of the local jurisdictions in member states. So Estonia, right? So really there's so much talent, ambition. We just need to create a better infrastructure for people to have that appetite to start companies. And it's not only about company law, it goes beyond procurement opportunities, but it all needs to be cross-border. You can't be stuck in silos, in small fragmented markets. Europe needs to be more unified for startup in that sense.
Let's say we as entrepreneurs, as startup founders, scale-up founders, what can we do now between now and the coming year? As you mentioned, you have the roadmap. What are things we could do? Because waiting is maybe losing the opportunity to do something. What are the things that you would recommend?
Yeah, I do feel like the startup scene is not very well presented in Brussels, and that doesn't mean that there is no representation at all. I just don't think it mirrors the experience that many startups outside this political bubble have. And so I do think that that is a very unfortunate development that, of course, is very difficult to tackle. Also for my side, for instance, I would like to very much engage with more startups, but it's difficult to find them because they don't even know about EU Inc. or 28th regime yet oftentimes. So in that sense, anyone listening, basically, please contact the people that are politically responsible for this file already now. I think right now is the best time, and I've also invited EU Inc. in that sense to sit together and actually look like what the legislative proposal could look like, because what we're doing right now in the parliament is very theoretical and doesn't actually get into the nitty-gritty of it all and how it can work and how we can bridge all these political gaps that I've been talking about, or the hurdles that I've been talking about. So it's very much about contacting the people that are in charge and make them listen to what actually needs to work in practice. That's very important because, to be very honest, I know this is very cynical, but none of the people that are right now in the negotiation room know what it's like to set up a startup, have ever worked in a startup, or know what the barriers to access to finance and talent are. And that, that's a political reality that, you need to make them listen.
Yeah. So they need to hear more. Let's say we have to walk the floors and or at least organize something where they are also part of it and that they can go in discussion with us. Because at the end, the paper is a paper. At the end, you do business for people, and I think there are people behind the policy that the EU Inc. wrote. So I think it's important there that startups, scale-ups find the regulators on a local level in their own country or on a European level to, let's say, convince them in which direction we should go. And every small step is hopefully the step in the right direction.
I mean, I think they have been really good at making it very difficult to run a business in Europe. So it's about time that what we find challenging at the moment is that in Europe, you don't have dedicated startup ministers as well in many countries. So there is also a division between who is actually responsible for this, because we are trying to engage with, local ministries at some, in some member states. And it seems quite, divided. And so it's and also like the ministers that will be responsible for implementing 28 regimes are justices. So there will be Ministry of Justices who have like a zero or no understanding of what it is like to run a business. So this will be very interesting. So the next 4 months will really set the tone for what the 28 regime really will be. And we need to try to bring more narrative and stories and to the right people. It is funny how it works in Europe. We have so many countries to navigate, and then EU institutions. So it's sometimes really hard to understand who is who and who is responsible for what.
Yeah, that's sometimes it's not the first person that will say it, but they are like working in an ivory tower, very high in the sky, and they don't know what's on the bottom. And I think they have to break it down a little more so that they are in the middle of those that they are working for. But yeah, at the end, it's responsibility of both sides. I think they can come lower and we can go up, and hopefully we find someone in the middle and find hopefully, or create something beautiful where every startup will benefit. What's Europe's real superpower? Trust, talent, or regulations? Yeah, maybe the question for the wrap up. So, Greta, what's the one message you want policymakers to take away from this conversation that, let's say, Iwona represents?
Most of the people involved in the negotiations are not actually in a startup background. Startups are not that represented in the conversation. So in that sense, I think what we just discussed last, which is how do we bring the higher level in the tower to the lower level, to the people that are actually affected, I think is the key message. Because as I said, politically, there's nothing actually speaking against EU Inc. Everybody agrees that it's a good idea and that it's necessary. The political hurdles of it are a political reality that needs to be dealt with, but they're already trying to do that. So I do think that it's really more about bringing the politics closer to the actual issues and thereby not creating so much extra bureaucracy and so much more fragmentation. I think that's the key message here.
Okay, and what makes you optimistic about Europe's tech future, despite all the bureaucracy between brackets?
Well, I do think that Europe is a place that has a lot of strengths. I think its diversity is a strength in a way. I do think that we have incredibly talented people and we have incredibly good ideas. We just don't keep them in Europe right now. And I do think that initiatives like the 28th regime can make that happen. So I think that, of course, it's always going to be fine as long as we believe in the people and the talent and the ideas that we have in Europe.
Okay. And Iwona, where can listeners learn more of the developments about EU Inc. and 28th regime?
Yes, so definitely follow us on LinkedIn on EU Inc. We update quite frequently. You can also check out our website, which is eu-inc.org, and we keep updated on the progress and our engagement with the European Commission, as well as other stakeholders. And we are pretty much present at every bigger conference in Europe as well. So you will be able to find us there. We always have someone speaking about it, making, and spreading awareness about what we do. The next, I guess, 3 months are very important for us as we are engaging with local ministries to ensure that they know about EU Inc. And that we want them to push for this specific solution. So if you know any ministers, please get in touch. Our contact details are on the website again. Yes, would love to hear from anyone.
So for you both, in one word, what does EU Inc. really mean for you personally?
I think if I have to pick one word, I would go for innovation.
For you, Iwona?
I think at this point, it means boldness, courage, and innovation. I have 3 words, sorry.
I give you that.
Momentum, once in a lifetime opportunity.
Momentum,
once in a lifetime opportunity is probably like one word with the dashes.
Okay, great.
I like momentum as well.
Yes, indeed. I think, and with this last question, I really like to thank you both for having you both here in the podcast. So thank you very much, and I hope we gave a good insight about EU Inc. and the roadmap and everything around it. And I'm really curious about the reactions of others and all their questions and remarks. So I pause them also to you both if there's something specific for you. And thank you very much, and see you next time. So if this episode really opened your eyes, please hit the subscribe button and maybe share it with one of your friends.